Let's learn how to make a new console application and actually get input from the keyboard. So we're going to say File, New, and we're going to work with a project. And let's go ahead and do a Visual C# console application.NET framework. And we're going to name this Practice, spelled correctly, Inputs. Practice Inputs. Remember where you are working on that. And then click OK. Just going to go ahead and create our new solution, which could have multiple projects in it. We only have one. It's going to name the program, actually program.cs. You know, I don't want to name that. I'm going to right mouse click on it. I could leave it that, but I'm going to go ahead and change it to be something else. Let's just call it inputs. And then it's going to prompt me if I want to go ahead and change it in my source code, which it does right there. And now here we want to get some data. For this program, what I want to do is I want to get a name, an age, a GPA, and whether or not they like ice cream. So how could I do that? Well, first of all, I know I need to create some variables to hold that data we're going to get from the keyboard. So I want to create a string variable, and I'm going to call it sname. Now I put a little character in front of my variable names. It's called Hungarian notation. And I do that so that later on in my source code, if I ever see a little character in front of a variable, I know the data type it is expecting. It doesn't make it happen. It's not required, but it helps readability. Sname, semicolon. And we want to go ahead and do an int for the age. So let's go ahead and create the other variable that we need. We're going to store the age, and we'll go ahead and make it an int. And I probably could store a byte, because I think probably everybody's age could be stored in a byte, 0 to 128, unless you're Methuselah. But we'll go ahead and go with an int, because it's a little bit easier and more standard to use for integers. And then we also wanted to store a Boolean value, and that Boolean is going to be for whether or not they like ice cream. And then we want to go ahead and store a value for the GPA. Now, in an earlier video, I talked about float versus double versus decimal. Decimal we use for currency type values. Otherwise, we use double, and we'll just say double the GPA. Did you notice, so when I type double, and I'll do it again, you have uppercase and lowercase? C# doesn't care. They mean the same thing, and someone just wrote it that way to make your life easier. So those are the four variables we're going to use. Let's take a look at Boolean. Right now I said the word Boolean. It's screaming at you and saying, hey, I don't know what that is. I typed in Boolean, lowercase Boolean. Let's try to type it one more time and see what happens. B-O-O, oh look, lowercase is B-O-O-L, whereas if I want an uppercase B, then it's Boolean, and they both mean the same thing. You can use either one, doesn't matter. Maybe I'll use the lowercase one to be more consistent. Now that I have my variables declared, I can use those to store things that I get from the keyboard. But in order to get something from the keyboard, you have to tell the user what they want to type in. So remember, the way that we do that is we use the console.writeLine or write. In this case, I'm going to say write, and you'll see what happens with that. Write, double quote, because we're making a literal string. Enter your name, colon, and I'm going to put a space. Now I want to go get that data. So I will say sname is equal to console.readLine, semicolon. This will say go and prompt the user to enter the name, and then wait for them to type something in and press the enter key, and then store it to that variable. Now I could have also used either readLine or read key. I'm going to paste some comments in there of the differences between the three. Instead of actually pasting those comments in though, I'm just going to show you what I found on Stack Overflow, which is your friend. The read key returns a character, so you'd need to store that to a character variable. It reads only one character from the keyboard. Once it grabs that character, by the way, keyboard, that's another word for input, standard input string. Once you press one key, it grabs that key and returns it to a variable that's waiting for it. if there is one. So like press Y or N, and returns it as a character. Now you don't have to use that. You could also use readLine. ReadLine returns the value as a string, so you'd have to declare a string variable and then store the data there. That's what we're doing right now. And it rings all the way up until you press the enter key. And then the read works just like the read key, but it returns it as an int instead of a character. So if you press capital A on your keyboard, it's going to return the int 65 to a variable, or lowercase a, 97. But these tell you the type of variable that you would have to declare: a character, a string, or an int. In our case, we're just going to work with the read line. Now that we have the name, let's go ahead and get the rest. So console.write, and I'm going to put a \n. That's an escape sequence. \n, number one, notice it's inside the double quotes. So that says drop down to the next line, enter your age, space. I add the space so that when the data is entered, it's not jammed up right next to the colon. And now we want to store that to an integer. Well, let's do the console.readLine. What did I say readLine returned though? ReadLine returns a string. So this is now mad, saying you can't store a string to an int. Taking a string and storing it to an int is like saying, let's take this round peg and jam it into a square hole. So the way we get around that, if you look at the error message, it says you cannot convert a string to an int, so we need to actually convert it ourselves. So here's how you convert it. You say convert dot to int, make sure case matters, and then you put the console.readLine parenthesis inside of that. Make sure you have the right parentheses. Next thing we'll do is we're going to say console.write, and let's go ahead and drop down another line by using our \n, and we'll say, do you like ice cream? And I'll put a question mark space this time. And now we want to go and get the be like ice cream, and if I said console.read key, that will grab one character, but the problem again is now it's saying you're trying to convert a character to a bool. Well, maybe it's not read key we want. Maybe we can do read line. And it says, no, now you can't convert that either. So the problem with this is we're asking a question. In fact, this would be smart to do, y/n. We actually tell them what we're looking for to help them know what to type in. The problem is we say we want to read a bool, but bools only work with the word true or false. And I don't want the user to type in true or false. So instead of making that bool, I would either make that a string or make it a char. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and we can make that a char. And instead of read line, we could say read key. By the way, let's go ahead and make that C like ice cream, and make that C like ice cream. Now, this is now saying we can't convert that read key to a char. The way we get around it is, even though we think we're getting a char, we actually have to specify dot key char. And that says make sure that whatever key they did read from the keyboard is turned into a keystroke. And then we can store it back to there. The last thing that we want to get is we want to get the GPA. So we could say \n, I'm going to bring it up some, enter your GPA, colon, space, and now we want to store that to dGPA equals console.readLine. But the problem you have now is, once again, readLine gets a string and you're trying to store it to a double. So just like we did with the integer, we have to convert that string to a double. And the way you do it is you can say double.parse and then the value. We now have all of our variables loaded up, and so now I can store that data. Now that the data is stored in the variables, I just want to print it out. So here's how we print all the data out. So the first thing I would do is I'd do my console write line using the escape sequence and add 2 blank lines, which I could have also put on this write line, but I just like to clean it up. In fact, I'll add more white space to make it look nicer. And then I'll print out your name is, plus sign, right, concatenation, take one value, add it to another value, so we should put our name and stick it to the end of this string. Take the age, stick it to this string. The do you like the ice cream, yes or no, stick it to this string. GPA, stick it to this string, and then I add a console.read line just to pause the screen so you can see it. So if we run that program, we should be able to build it. Hopefully there's no errors. What is your name? My name is Mickey Mouse. Notice that it's on the same line. That's because I did a write and not a write line. What is your age? And then I add the /n to drop it down. Your age is, sure, 120. Do you like ice cream? Yes. Enter your GPA, 3.6. Mickey's pretty smart. And then we do the 2 blank lines. Your name is Mickey Mouse, what your age is, the ice cream, and your GPA, and now it's waiting for us to press a key. That's how you declare variables, prompt the user to get data, how to load data using read line, how to convert ints to, or strings to int and strings to double, how to get a character from the keyboard using read key but turning it into a character, and then how to display the data and wait for the user to press a key.